and welcome to the Big Happy Life podcast. I'm Natalie Britt and I'm a habit and mindset coach. And this podcast is all about the habits and mindset it takes to live your big life with all of the roles that you play and all of the demands you have on you in such a way that you actually enjoy it because you feel in control. You have everything you need inside you to weather the tough stuff when it comes. And while all of that's going on, you can be a great role model for your kids. I chose those goals rather selfishly because they're my goals, but then habit and mindset is something that I've had to focus on a lot in my life and continue to have to focus on. And what I found with myself and with my clients in terms of mindset is that habits around food, alcohol, and lifestyle makes such a massive difference to how our emotions play out and what life actually feels like, regardless of what's happening around us. When I first started looking into my own mental health and trying to find why I just kept feeling like I was being thrown around by my emotions, I was up one day and down the next, fine one minute and anxious the next, really grumpy for no reason, or unable to let stuff go, like the smallest little things that I would stew over for hours. And when I started to try and break those patterns, what fascinated me was that all roads seemed to lead to the gut. Since discovering that, I've made a lot of positive changes to my habits in terms of food, drink, lifestyle, and I've seen some great improvements, but there's still a lot that doesn't feel brilliant. And so I found myself wondering, how good is it actually possible to feel? So I started this podcast series in an effort to ask people in the know about their answers to that question. And somebody who is perfectly placed to talk to us about that is Hannah Richards, who is the owner of the Gut Clinic and author of the fascinating and brilliant book, The Best Possible You. I loved talking to Hannah because, first of all, she's really, really informative and knowledgeable. And secondly, she's so comfortable talking about all things gut related. So in this episode, we go all the way from the food you put in to the poo that comes out the other side and everything in between. This episode is so chock full of great information, you may even want a pen and paper handy. Here's our conversation. I want to start by asking you how and why the gut became your thing.
Yeah, good question. I guess it stemmed from when I first got into nutrition. I found it quite this for that and that for this, sort of a similar approach to the way that medicine works. You know, I've got a problem with my skin, take this drug. I've got a problem with my stomach, let's stop the acid, take this drug. I've got a problem with constipation, let's take this drug. And I think that I sort of found nutrition a little bit like that. And I got into luckily found some very incredibly knowledgeable practitioners to study from, the likes of Reed Davis, the likes of Sherry Dixon, Emma Lane, Paul Chek, Bill Wilcox, and they were in a very functional. They're all functional medicine practitioners looking at the etiology of the issue and all the other aspects that could be part of the symptom that arises that the person only notices. So lots of people only notice one thing. They don't notice all the other things that actually have happened before the symptom arises. By the time symptoms arise, you could be 10 years down the line of a disease state in the body. So symptoms are some of the worst things to notice because they've breeded for a long time. They don't just turn up one day, which I think is the common opinion of most people. It just happened. A lot of emotional stuff's happened underneath that as well. And so I got into the nutrition by being, wildly interested and inspired by these practitioners. And I guess the gut was interesting because it just covered all of health for me. It's such a long, windy road that looks at the emotional state of a person as well as the digesting of life and of food and incorporates a huge 360-degree way of looking at health. And yes, I guess I was inspired hugely by Emma Lane, who I learned a lot from and did a lot of her courses. And she was big into the gut, way back when people didn't realize the gut existed.
Yeah.
Which is odd, isn't it? It's like coconut oil. We all go crazy, but people have been using it for centuries. And now they put the gut in food bars, in juices. It's like as vogue as gluten-free. Like they found something that's been buried for years. So I think there's a huge depth to the gut that is really, really, really interesting. And I like the emotional side of it. And I'm a huge believer in that, even though I look at a lot of people's lifestyle habits and the food they eat and the source of the food and the quality of the food and when they eat and who they eat with and how they eat it and all those things, all the mechanical and the physical nutritional side of things, you can't take away the fact that the emotional sort of CV of the person is actually at the etiology of most people's gut issues, and that's why I find it fascinating, I suppose.
That was one of the key reasons I wanted to talk to you, because when I started my journey in trying to kind of balance my mental health, stabilize my moods, and just feel like I actually had some control over my emotions, rather than being thrown around by them all over the place without feeling like I really understood what the hell was going on, all roads led me back to the gut. And that surprised me, because it had never occurred to me, the glass of wine that I wanted at the end of the day, or the bar of chocolate that I wanted that was supposed to make me feel better, would ultimately exacerbate the issues that I was experiencing, or that any of the ways that I was living or the things that I was eating could have any impact on how I felt or how I thought. But the cyclical nature of those things, like how you think, determines so much about how you eat and what you choose, but those things also determine how you think. And so it's like the minute you make a single improvement, you're going to see improvements in both areas. And so, a friend of mine recommended your book to me, which I have absolutely loved, and I'm in my second reading of. So what I wanted to ask you was, you talk in the book about the 4 bodies. Can you tell us, first of all, a little bit about the 4 bodies, but can you also talk a little bit about how you came to realize that those things were all important and that they played equal part?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so you've got the emotional body, the nutritional body, physical body, and mental body. And I guess it's about looking at, it comes from looking at the body with a telescope or looking through a magnifying glass. And if you only look, if you say my knee hurts, and you go into the knee with keyhole surgery and you fix the knee, what you don't fix is the reason that the knee and the ACL and all the ligaments in the knee got stressed out in the first place. You don't look into all the other roads that came from a stressed set of joint. And when you look at certain things in the body, they've all got different, like I said, the 4 different bodies. So every organ in the body is fed by a nerve which stems from the vertebrae. So all organs, the whole visceral system, is married with the physical body. So, when your shoulders hurt, whether it's your left or your right, you're looking at the liver or your heart. Most people don't look at the viscerosomatic pain patterns because they're not aware that they exist. So if you're only looking at an organ system, or if you're only looking at an injury, then you're looking one-dimensionally at the body, and you're almost doing that body a disservice. The body is an organic machine, it's designed to heal, and therefore you cannot take away all those different bodies that have got you to a place where a symptom has arisen, disease has set in, or illness is apparent. So you talk about the physical body, and yes, we talk about the musculoskeletal system, or, maybe an injury that we've had. But how did the injury start? And then you're looking at the emotional makeup of the body. They are in an addictive state? Are they over-exercising? Why are they over-exercising? Where are they unfulfilled? And then depending where that pain is, it's going to be linked to an organ. So you're looking at the nutritional body. Often people's pain is taken away when they address their diet. When they address the diet, the tendons, the ligaments learn how to behave more, because it's all about tissue makeup. So the 4 bodies are integral to healing, to a holistic, intuitive healing program. And a lot of people will fix by not doing that, but if you've certainly been in physio for 5 years, then someone's not looking 3-dimensionally at where you need the help, because there's you can mechanically screen a problem, and once it's been mechanically screened, there is no mechanical issue there. So that's when you go to the nerve feeds and look at the viscerosomatic pain patterns.
Okay.
So
before we go any further, viscerosomatic pain patterns.
So the organ system is the visceral system. So all the organs in the body. So if you think about your vertebrae, we've got different sections of the vertebrae, and they all feed to the organs. Okay. So that's the pain pattern. That's the viscerosomatic pain patterns.
Okay, so you can follow those.
You can follow them, exactly. So every organ is connected with a bit of the vertebrae. So that's why when certain parts of your body hurt, you can direct them back to the organ that feeds them from the vertebrae.
Okay.
And that's how the physical body and the nutritional body suddenly to come together in a much more comprehensive way. When you look at the digestive system, well, if you think about the organs, they're a bit compacted, aren't they? Like, but they're not flat packed. They're not an IKEA sofa. They live 3-dimensionally in the body. They're like, hanging baubles on a tree. They all have the liver is attached by 3 ligaments. It hangs in a space. It has its metaphysical space in the body. Now, if you end up being in a very kyphotic posture, which means that your thoracic back is curved, and if you curve your shoulders in, suddenly your head, which weighs a stone, comes forward. You compress your lungs and your rib cage, and then therefore you're compressing your diaphragm, which is the seat of all emotions, and then you've compressed your entire digestive system. So then you sit all day, and you can suddenly see how all your organ system isn't getting a workout. There's a stagnicity within the body, because it doesn't have enough room to move. And if you look at the bone structure of your body, there's not, and all the organs that you do have, which is quite a lot, there's a small space for them all to be sort of happily cohabiting together. So if you sit there now, put your 2 feet on the floor and suddenly lift your sternum, you've suddenly created, your abs are now working, aren't they? Your abdominals are now working. Your ribs have expanded, your diaphragm is lifted, and your belly is moving in and out. So even just by the way that we hold our bodies physically, the way that we sit, that we stand, we are on a daily basis affecting the way that whether our organs are going to be in a happy state or not. And when they're not in a happy state and they're compressed, you're more prone to injury, scar tissue, things like that. And then you've got, then that manifests itself all the way around the body. So just from sitting in your posture, which is one of the most important things to do for digestive health, forget fiber bars. How are you sitting every day to create in a space where you're not creating acid reflux, you're not creating a tightness in sphincters and the small intestines and compression. These are the really important things when it comes to digestive health, and not whether you're taking probiotics or not, for sure.
Wow. That's fascinating. So, okay, as you know, this episode is part of a series which is all in aid of answering the question, how good is it possible to feel?
Yeah.
And what I'm curious to know is, in your book, I think I've marked it out actually, you said there are a few simple prerequisites for being a highly efficient, all systems firing, functional human being. This is on page 10. And you've talked about optimal and intelligent food sourcing, optimum digestion and absorption, optimum hydration levels, optimum sleep, and optimum movement. So those are all some of the things that we can do. But what I'm curious about is when you talk about being a highly efficient, all cylinders firing, functional human being, what can we expect? Like, what is top of the range, all systems firing, look and feel like?
It's making sure your batteries work. Most people's batteries don't work, or they've run out, and we don't have any knowledge of how to recharge them. The problem is with the health and the wellness world is that when your batteries run out, which is code for metabolism, we tend to go towards the smoothies, the protein shake, the lean, green, mean machine types of foods to give us a boost and to give us a high. And I'm not sure that always really, really works. So what we're looking for when you're all cylinders firing is the ability to, I always say to my clients, there are two vital signs of life. We assume breathing is there anyway, but my vital signs of life are waking up hungry in the morning and waking up and needing a poo, an elimination. If those two things don't happen, then the battery is slightly sluggish. And so we want to be able to regulate our own body temperature, and yet most of us live. I used to say, if I had £1 for the amount of people who told me they'd done a fast or a cleanse, I now say if I had £1 for the amount of people that tell me their central heating is on all day long, I'd be a very rich person. Keeping our central heating on doesn't allow our thermogenesis to be able for us to regulate our body temperature. So we don't go from one place to another place. We're just constantly a bit sort of soporific in our own houses, not sure whether we're hungry, not sure whether we're cold, not sure what we want, but just have everything that we need. So metabolism, by having a fully functional metabolism, you regulate your body temperature, which should be warm in the morning, which should be 36.5. And then it should rise again on eating. That makes sense, doesn't it? Because food gives us energy. Most people can't convert food to energy, hence the plethora of symptoms that we collect throughout our lives, because we're eating this food. It's like having a handbag full of stuff you do nothing with. You just lug it around all day. Well, food can be a bit like that for some bodies that don't have the ability to absorb and assimilate and digest because they're eating on the run, or they have insufficient hydrochloric acid, bile, enzymes, all those things, which sort of brings you to this place of IBS, which isn't really a diagnosis in my book. It's sort of a irritable bowel syndrome. It's sort of lazy bowel syndrome. Most people don't have the adequate tools, liquids and acids to break the food down. And rather than thinking about how to repair that state of discontent, we eat foods that are harder to digest. So typically when somebody does a detox or goes on a health kick, they eat nuts and seeds and raw veg. Now, if you haven't got any acid, bile or enzymes, you've just set yourself up for a huge amount of failure. I always give the example of trying to neatly bite tender stem broccoli with your teeth. You just can't do it. You'll be there forever pulling it out because it's so fibrous. Now think about how that's the point of the acid. The acid and the enzymes work on the food to break it down, and the more fibrous and stringy the foods are to start with in a body that has little of these ingredients, you sort of put yourself between a rock and a hard place.
So if you wake up hungry and needing a poo, it's a good sign.
Very good sign, because you've ignited your weight. You've woken up. You've been hit by the sunlight. The sunlight stimulates the vitamin D. The cortisol gets moving. You're into your circadian rhythm, and your body knows what it's doing. So you're awake with the sun. You're ready to start the day. You've got stack loads of energy because your temperature is good, which means your metabolism is good, which means your thyroid is working, which controls satiety. It knows when you're hungry. So you feed yourself food that's going to give you, a boost of energy. We need some sugar in the morning. We need some fat, some protein. All these diets that have constantly given us, we need a whole load of protein on the plate. Those people end up having less digestive capabilities because they've tanked out their hydrochloric acid through their life. You want to wake up in the morning, feel like you want to jump out of bed, and eat food. Be hungry to eat food, to feed the body that's just fasted for the whole night, which is the only fast the body needs, the one where you're in bed. Okay. As opposed to, I'm not against fasting. I just don't think most people have the adequate physiology to fast. There's no need to it. It takes them away from where they're trying to get.
Okay. So would you think, because a lot of people have incredible results on fasting. A lot of people seem to have incredible results on keto.
But let me ask you, if you ask these people who've had incredible results, whatever that means, where they are in a year, in 2 years, do we know any of that information, or we just like the female who says, oh, I gave up sugar for 2 weeks and felt amazing, felt absolute clarity in the head, felt really good, didn't drink for 2 weeks, never felt better, and on day 15, go back to their old self. So it doesn't work because it's not sustainable. Neither is it manageable. Neither is it doing any good for the body. Everyone can do something for 10 days, for 2 weeks, maybe even 12 weeks. But if they go back to their old self, then what they've done is it's just a fad diet. And keto, unfortunately, is for a lot of people. It's unsustainable. Female hormones are built on carbohydrates. Females are not designed to eat fat and protein for their whole lives, which is why infertility is rife, which is why, there are lots of thyroid issues going on in the female world, certainly as females get older. And that's because we've taken out carbohydrates. We think they're the demon. We think fruit's a joke. We think we'll get fat if we eat fruit. But no one waxes lyrical about the Chardonnay they drink and the Doritos they dip into and the cheesy chips. It's all coconut oil and, fruit. The amount people go on and on about how fruit is bad for you. So there's a real hypocrisy around what's good and what's not, depending on what's vogue really at the moment. So, I think that, your metabolism underpins everything. If you think about your metabolism, food creates energy. So you've got a whole load of energy first thing in the morning. Then you eat your food, and your food makes you feel even better. If your food tanks you out and you dip into a food coma, then something's happened there. So either the food hasn't worked, or you've eaten too much, or you've eaten too fast. But if your food tanks you out, something's gone wrong.
Okay, that's good. Okay.
So you need to keep understanding that food is designed to make you have more energy. And the more work you do, the more food you need to put in. If you're someone that doesn't really do much work in terms of physical movement and energy or brain power, then you need to eat less food to give you the same energetic results. Okay. A lot of us overeat. So if you're looking for weight loss, you need to have a look at your activity level definitely against what you're doing. Against what you're eating, sorry. And then if you think about, so you've got metabolism, you've got energy, and that drives the digestive system. We know how long the digestive system is, don't we? It's meters of this terrain of acids, of alkalines, of it's like a jacuzzi in the stomach, spurting in acids, breaking things down. And we need energy to move it along through the esophagus, into the stomach, out of the stomach. It's got a tough job in the stomach. It's got sort of like a 1 millimeter exit to get out of. So you've got to break all this food down into chyme, get it through into the duodenum, a huge long journey through the duodenum, if fermentation isn't there, if SIBO isn't there, into the large intestine where you've got to pump it uphill, across and down before it comes out. Now, if you've run out of energy, how are you going to pump that matter uphill, across and out? Which leads us to not having enough energy to run your digestive system, which is really at the heart of these motility issues, the heart of constipation, which brings us to stress. The more stressed a person is, the more times you will see constipation in that person and a low thyroid.
Okay, why is that?
Because it's all based on energy. All these conversions happen in the body.
And stress uses more energy?
And stress uses more energy. Okay. So you can run on your stress hormones or your sex hormones. And once you've sort of burnt out your progesterone and pregnenolone, you start using all your cortisol. And the cortisol is, as we know, it's, and our adrenaline, our sort of fight and flight hormones. And we want to, once a person gets so stressed out, that's all they're running on.
Okay.
So they're constantly in this sympathetic drive, this catabolic place, which becomes hard to get out of because there's no time for rest and repair.
Okay. So there were a lot of words. I mean, again, I've heard a lot of the terms. I know progesterone and I know all these things, but hearing it all together, it's sort of a lot to digest. So if I go back to, we wake up in the mornings, ideally you're going to be hungry, you're going to need a poo. In terms of energy, if you wake up and you feel sleepy, is that normal or is that an indication that actually something's not 100% right?
Yeah, I think it's an indication that you haven't slept well or there's other stuff going on and not everyone wakes up in the morning and jumps out of bed, that's for sure.
Okay. So when I say about it's how good is it possible to feel, if we're measuring it on, because this is one of the things that people say on juice fasts and ketos, I wake up in the morning and I just jumped out of bed. I was just, so full of energy. So what I'm curious about is when you talked about a fully functioning, all cylinders firing, functional human being, do they jump out of bed every day? Or that it's perfectly normal not to?
I think if you've got everything down, if everything works, there's no reason not to wake up and feel great in the morning. It's just the norm not to.
Okay. So those would be 3 indicating factors that something, even if you do not have symptoms yet, that something needs realigning.
Yeah.
If you don't wake up hungry, you don't need to poo, and you wake up and you feel tired. Those are things to pay attention to.
That would indicate that there is a stress in somewhere in the body that definitely needs addressing.
Okay.
Because if you think about it, if we go back to the idea that you need energy to drive the digestive system, you also need energy to wake up. So when people say, oh, I'm such a good sleeper, I can sleep for 10 hours or 12. I say, well, you must be knackered. You must be knackered if you're sleeping for half the day and can't wake up. And it's a sort of a shock. It's a shock to say, oh, God, I'm missing half my life, which is another true statement if you're sleeping for 12 hours a day. So it's all about this energy conversion. We've got to convert energy to be able to be firing on cylinders. It's not the food that is causing the problem. It's the system it goes into.
Okay.
And the digestive system is like this conveyor belt. And once it stops, lots of problems happen with it.
Okay.
So you need energy to drive it.
That makes sense. So another thing you said that was really, really helpful was if you have less energy after you eat, that's an indication either that something's gone wrong with either the eating process or the food.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you can either eat too many carbohydrates or you can eat too much fat and protein, depending on which way you're designed, how you take in food for energy, which macronutrient you're better designed to. But yeah, if you're sort of having this food coma at the end of every meal, then you could be eating way too quickly. A lot of people don't chew their food, which is the first point of digestion, mastication, chewing. That's why we have teeth. We need to chew the food to break it down so that the rest of the body can absorb it. But often, we've all eaten too fast, you get indigestion. Well, imagine doing that every mouthful. Suddenly you've tanked out your body's ability to use the food as energy, because it gets tired very, very quickly. So if you're going into a food coma, more likely it's because you don't have the appropriate enzymes to break the food down, you've eaten too fast, you've eaten too much, or all three.
Okay.
So yeah, you want to be able to, little and often it works for some people, doesn't it? But you can play around with your macronutrients. So protein, fat, and carbohydrates. Are you eating too much protein at any one meal? It's the hardest thing for the body to break down. If you've got acid reflux, then you've got a low state of hydrochloric acid in the stomach, and you want to be eating as a part of a protocol foods that are much more easily absorbable, so you don't tank out any more of that acid. You want to start building the acid. And sometimes too high a protein purine foods can create stress on the stomach. So it's all about about finding your metabolic blueprint, really, your digestive blueprint of what works for you. And that comes into, the looking at the emotional body, the nutritional body, the mental body, really getting in touch with what you're eating, why you're eating, how it's working, what it's doing. And that's why when symptoms crop up, we go, oh God, I've suddenly got this. Well, it's probably been brewing for 5 or longer years. We've just ignored it.
Okay. So somebody's listening to this. There's been a lot of information. I'm going to have to watch it back and try and take it all in. But let's say you have somebody who has listened to this and is going, I'm sort of midway, sometimes I wake up with energy, sometimes I don't, sometimes I wake up and have a poo, sometimes I don't, sometimes I wake up hungry, sometimes I don't. What would you say to them? Like, where do they need to start? What do they need to consider as their first port of call so that they can start figuring out how to feel their best?
I'd ask them what they're not being consistent with. If you've got a fully functional digestive system, a fully functional gut, then you pretty much do wake up every day and have a poo, unless you've just jumped on a plane and then your circadian rhythms and your biological rhythms have changed, and that's created stress. So that's understandable. But if some mornings you wake up and you feel good, why didn't you feel, what happened the night before for the mornings not to feel good? Are you drinking alcohol? Are you trying to kick it? And the days that you get a jammed up digestive system and a moody head, the days you drink alcohol or overeat, what are the offshoots what are the consequences of your inconsistency? Most of these things is all about consistency. And if people, it's sort of a tough line, but if you want to see results, you've got to be consistent. The body's really good at buffering things. It's designed not to let you die, It's designed to try. It's like, but your body's a bit like a dog, it just wants the best of you. It's your best friend. It's really striving to support you in all areas. But if you're not consistent, then you'll just keep seeing different, like you say, sometimes good, sometimes bad. So I'd ask people to get a bit honest with themselves and say, what do I need to improve on?
Okay, that makes sense. And then, let's take it further back. Let's say somebody's listening to this and they're going, do you know what? I have no energy. I don't mean any of those things when I wake up in the morning. I wake up shattered. I don't have a poo. I'm not hungry until like 2 p.m. Where do they begin? Because when we first spoke, you were talking about, in our previous conversation, you were talking about like there's no one food, there's no list of 10 foods. Like that's not the answer. So where would somebody begin if they're right at the start of their journey and it's all just confusing and overwhelming?
I think there definitely are foods that do help, for sure. I just don't think there's a list of foods for gut health, like the prune juice and all those kind of things. I'm not a fan of saying these foods are for this. It's all very individualized, but typically I would see someone who, yes, as you said, feels a bit sluggish, wants to lose a bit of weight, probably got constipation, probably got a low body temperature. And I would look at their diet and get them eating breakfast or a bite, creating energy in the morning. You don't have to sit down and have 2 sausages, bacon and eggs and whatever you have. You just need to get some nutrients into your body. And that could look like, a glass of orange juice, a bowl of yogurt and some fruit, 1 egg, a bit of banana. It doesn't need to be a huge amount of food if you're not a breakfast person. But if you haven't got any energy, what you do need to do is feed your body. Are you drinking enough water throughout the day? And then having a look at the foods that are creating stress, which unfortunately, and I'm a huge fan of these foods, but unfortunately, when you have digestive stress, you've got to really give them a back seat, which are the green vegetables, because they're very fibrous. They can be quite high in toxins because they live outside of the ground. And they're hard to break down. So if you are going to eat them, steam them. But when I see people with digestive complaints, I take away raw food immediately, and it creates a much better digestive stability in the body.
Wow. Okay. Well, so you've kind of blown my mind, because that's the opposite of everything that I have sort of been ramming down my own throat for many years now. Don't drink juice because it's just too much sugar, pumping your system, insulin spikes, blah, blah, blah. Like, we've been taught so much that sugar is the devil. I make fresh vegetable juices every day. I've stopped putting fruit in them. So what you're saying about, fruit isn't the devil. How has that happened?
I think basically when people blame sugar for everything that you can ever imagine, they just tarred all sugar with the same brush. So, sugar is sugar is sugar, sure, but there are chemicals to the refined sugars. Fruit's got 101 different nutrients in it. It's got our vitamin C. We needed vitamin C back in the day before supplements came along. No one had a problem then, did they? So as we've sort of introduced all these fortified foods and supplementation that we've taken away from the natural world, because an orange costs 50p and a bottle of vitamin C supplements is $8.99. And sugar in its fructose form is a wonderful way to stop sugar cravings. I mean, people don't, like I say, the amount of people who say they eat chocolate and tell me they eat dairy milk and Nestle and all that rubbish. Like, you don't eat chocolate at all. You don't even crave the stuff. You're eating a complete chemical shitstorm of bad stuff to put in your body and saying that you crave chocolate. Chocolate in its greatest form are companies like Bare Bones Chocolate, Booja Booja, where it's raw cacao and coconut raw cane sugar. These are the products that we want in our bodies for sugar. The brain runs on glucose. So does the body. We need a huge amount of it. And the people who wax lyrical about how they've given up sugar for 2 years. Well, I certainly wouldn't want to live with them, because the moment you start eliminating things from your life, you start becoming, neurotic and fastidious. I'm quite happy for people to have their own ways of eating. I have absolutely no need to change anyone's mind on how they eat. But the moment it becomes very linear and very this sort of angry opinion, then we've got something wrong. We're not being rounded, are we? We're not feeding our brains and our emotional brain to be able to have decent and open and honest communication.
Yeah.
We're suddenly becoming, no, it's my way or the highway. And that's a stressed place. That's a catabolically stressed, sympathetic place to be living in. And this happens when we start eliminating things out of life.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm saying all we actually need to start eliminating are the kale smoothies, because the kale smoothies are the guys that got us to this place in the first place. I mean, no one likes the stuff anyway, but we just got to get a bit more honest. There's nothing wrong with fruit. It's got, pineapple, papaya, full of digestive enzymes. It's where digestive enzymes start from. Bromelain and papain, they're designed to break down meats. It's why you get gammon and pineapple together. The meat's hard, the pineapple provides the enzymes to break it down. So, sure, stop the Cadbury's and the Nestle, the Doritos and the Oreos. Don't give fruit a hard time.
Okay. So, I think it's because, like, what you've helped me kind of map out in my mind, and I hope the minds of anyone listening as well, is the food isn't the issue. What the food does to you, the result it has, is the thing you should be paying attention to. If it gives you energy in a way that sustains your energy rather than you spike and then you drop, then it's likely that you're doing the right thing and your body's handling it well. You're doing the right thing for you, because it's different for different people. Mm-hmm. So the orange juices and the yogurt with the fruit and those kinds of things are not the issue. But if you feel that you need to drink the whole bottle of orange juice, then probably something's not quite right. If you need you need to keep eating 5 pieces of fruit, then that's potentially something too.
Yeah.
Am I missing the point?
No, not at all. It's the overconsumption is definitely an issue. It's like people who drink the same as people who drink 5 litres of water. People drink 5 litres of water and complain of being bloated. I say, well, why don't you drop to 2 and see what happens? And oh gosh, rocket science, they're not bloated. So we can overconsume anything. And that's the emotional body. There's the link with the emotional body and the nutritional body with the gut. Something's not sitting right. It doesn't matter what people pick. Some people pick porn. Some people pick exercise. Some people pick drugs, shopping, stealing. It doesn't matter what the overconsumption or need or addiction is. It's that the pathway in the body is being created to fulfill something that isn't there, that they are not happy with in their lives. Okay. And that can be health. I mean, there's a lot of health addicts out there. Just have a flick through Instagram and you'll find them all. They're all not, it's this elimination, it's this fasting, it's this way, it's that way. What we need to be doing is exactly what you just said. Asking ourselves whether something works for us. Did I enjoy that breakfast that I just ate? Or suddenly did I find myself having a runny poo, getting a bit angry, feeling hungry immediately, craving something? If any of these signs and symptoms come up, then yes, something didn't work. And that is your job to sort of start to understand how your bodies work. The moment we just use food as fodder and eat it blindly without sitting down, without being grateful, without absorbing, digesting, chewing, creating this cephalic response, then we become, we start creating this self-fulfilling prophecy that we get ill because we are not taking the time to look after our bodies or see what we are doing, whether what we are doing is working for us. Mm-hmm. So symptoms are at the end of the health paradigm. Symptoms are closer to disease than symptoms are closer to a state of health. They have taken time to breed. It's like if you think about an iceberg, you see the water level, you see an iceberg sticking out at the top, don't you? But what's bigger, the bit out at the top of the water or the iceberg underneath the surface of the water? The growth takes a huge amount of time to rear up before we get to see it, feel it, understand it, or do something about it. And that's all I'm trying to do is to sort of get honest about how you feel, what works and what doesn't work. I always say to my clients when they give me their food diaries and we look at what they're doing, I ask them what they want, and then I say, shall we just agree that all of this isn't working for you at this moment in time? And it doesn't go down well all the time, but if I've got it right, it does. And then that's sort of quite a relaxing place to be, because through hook or crook, what you've done isn't working. It doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it's not working for you to get where you want. So now we get to change it. We know that that formula doesn't work. Let's start piecing a formula together that does work. And it's really that simple. But it starts from creating energy. Without energy, you have nothing. You don't have systems that work. You have systems that get blocked, that get sluggish, and then your mind gets slow and sluggish and angry and frustrated. And that's when we get into all the emotions of the body and the digestive system as well.
Okay, amazing. That really has helped so much. So in terms of, I know I've sort of asked you this, but just to leave people with something really practical and something that, regardless of where they are on their journey, that you would say, just do this or pay attention to that. Where would you direct people as a really practical thing they can do that allows them to take charge early before they wait for symptoms to manifest and therefore begin the road to feeling their best?
I mean, the biggest one for me is making sure that you have a bowel movement every day.
Okay.
Because that's toxicity we have to eliminate. I think that's the most important thing to concentrate on, that your body is eliminating. I think water is essential. Are you having enough water? It can be in your tea, it can be in your juice, it all adds up. I think the body needs to sweat. So whether that's from a walk, a power walk, or lifting weights, you've got to sweat your body. That's what it's designed to do. Daily? Yeah, I'd say in some way. Yeah, you've got to use we reckon that you should be able to lift 2/3 of your body. So if you're 60 kilos, you should be able to lift 40 kilos. And most people can't do that. So that's really important to you to know the strength. Can you do a press up, for example? Can you take your own body weight? And I when it comes to food, it's just, here are my things for food. If you've got digestive issues, it's got to be organic. I'm not arguing organic. It's got to be organic. Organic, seasonal, and fresh, and cook with your own hands. That's that simple. Okay. Buy locally, be loyal, stay local, get educated on where food comes from, what soils are good. Because if we don't, we will not have choice. And, the top layer of soil is like our digestive system. We've got to start respecting the soil and where the food comes from, because then we respect our own bodies. If it can live on a shelf for 2 years, if it's been heated, treated, coloured, injected, packaged, and flown thousands of miles around the world, then our bodies, our little organic, self-healing bodies, are going to have a problem digesting that. Okay. So keep it organic, keep it seasonal, keep it fresh, keep it colourful, and use your own hands. You do not need to know how to cook. And by doing that, you get me time back. You get some downtime, some creativity. So those would be my tips. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. I wanted to ask you, I know we are pretty much out of time. One of the things I find really fascinating, you talk about on Instagram, so if you have time to share with us here, is you talked about bowel movements, but you've talked about how different bowel movements, so not all bowel movements are created equal. Could you share with us just very briefly what to look for? And we'll finish on that. We'll finish on bowel movements. Absolutely. So it sort of wants to look, like a good solid 6 inches daily, if not, 3 times a day, where it's good consistency. And it happens the same time roughly every day, food in, food out. If it's sloppy and it's watery, then we're looking at malabsorption issues. If it's sort of quite toxic and smelly, then there you go, toxicity. Is there a dysbiosis? What's going on in the gut that your body doesn't want, that's trying to excrete? If it's hard and heavy, there's constipation. Is there enough water, enough fiber? But, it comes down to a lot of stress, that as well. And if they float, that can be a bile acid issue, a fat malabsorption issue. So are you eating too much fat, or are you do you not have enough lipase to break down the fat? And if it's quite heavy, then it can often be too much protein, and certainly protein powder and protein bars in the body as well. Probably important to say that the red flags of the bowel are black stool and red in the stool. Those are two things you don't want to see, and certainly seek advice if you are seeing them on a regular basis.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Now, on the show notes page, I will include links to your website. I know you work one-to-one. You also have group programs where people can work with you to kind of really get into, how do I do this for myself? You work with people one-to-one, so they can find all of that on your website, and they can follow you on Instagram. Is there anywhere else where people can find you that would be good for them to learn about some of the things that you do?
I guess the most information is really on my Instagram and website, the videos. There's YouTube as well, but mostly everything goes via the website and Instagram in terms of videos and information.
Okay, great. Well, all of those will be available for anyone listening on the show notes page. But yeah, amazing. Thank you, Hannah, so much. It was really just so interesting talking to you. And you've freed me from a lot of things that I thought I had to be very afraid of. So that's great.
Absolutely not. Yeah. Go forth and eat fruit.
Thanks, Hannah.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, there you go. Go forth and eat fruit. Who knew, huh? This conversation has given me so much to think about, and I hope it's given you a lot to think about as well. Of course, it's very important to say that the advice that Hannah was sharing here is in relation to people who have gut issues, where something in the gut is not working as it's meant to, and they are not able to digest food the way it's supposed to be digested. So when she's talking about eating too much green veg, that's specific to people whose bodies are not properly digesting such difficult to digest foods. And really, that's one of the keys that I took from this conversation, was that we are all unique and our digestive systems are unique. And each one of us has to pay attention to our body and what it's telling us. We have to pay attention to those signs of energy, bowel movements, hunger. And we have to pay attention to them throughout the day. We have to pay attention to our four bodies, so we don't just think about what food we're putting in. We think about how we feel about what we eat. We think about the context in which we eat. How grateful are we for the lives that we've built and the people who surround us while we eat the food? And do we take a moment to actually chew it and pay attention to it and allow it to digest from the moment it enters our mouths? These are all things that affect gut health, and gut health affects everything else. If you would like to contact Hannah and get further one-to-one help or join one of her amazing group programs, you can do that at thegutclinic.net, and you can also find her on Instagram. Her handle is thegutclinic. And as always, you can leave a comment or ask a question about this episode on the show notes page, which you'll find at bighappylife.co.uk. If you've enjoyed this episode, it would be wonderful and greatly appreciated if you would leave a review. And if you know someone who would benefit from hearing this episode, then please do share it, perhaps even add a personal note. The more we all learn and the more we share, the more we grow together. For now, though, thanks for listening.